Stacks project. A stack is a linear data structure, and more abstractly, a sequential collection. We have what I call top of mind, the top of the stack, where you can push hide elements or pop them off. There's a graph of stacks in the workspace, a network of stacks, substacks. In the delta workspace, which is the workspace changing over time, the delta is the change. You have efficient access to what the stacks, which is essentially treated as values, and you can pass them around as arguments in the functional application of spontaneous organization and disorganization of the workspace. So the values in the abstract organization of the workspace, it's a relationship among values. There's a cost of accessing and moving values, substacks, in the physical database or 3D database, which is the workspace, the historiotheque. So in the Stacks project, you have sorting algorithms in the 3D workspace, delta workspace. And you see collation is the assembly of written information into a standard order. The workspace is actually in disorder, disorganization, complex disorder with sedimentation, what we call geogrammatical forms. My art is concretely real. There's a conceptual order, temporal order, in what I call the ref card system. There's an index. Geogrammar or geogrammatical forms, it turns out, may have been inspired by my own art studio, my art space, the Historiotheque, where I keep things piled up as I work. I use a lot of documentation. I read maybe 20, 30 books per project when I start the project to get informed, to educate myself, to do research, so that's not just based on improvisation necessarily. I do improvise when I work on each piece, but so the geogrammatical forms, which I once called Crackland in the Crackland journals. Crackland was the land of fissures, and I imagined these land fragments floating in space, what I once, in a new novel, the Archives Project, called Anti-Face Cloud. And it's these land masses that are floating in space and connected together. And I realized that the surfaces of the stacks, because there's a 3D curve at the surface of the studio, which is every exposed face that's facing me or facing the ceiling, and those are the land masses really. And the concepts that I come up with for each of my new projects always seem to come from inspiration from within the Historiotheque, my art studio. So it's a space not only where I create art, but it's a space where I do research. It's a research lab. I do experiments. For every project, there's a series and sub-series of experiments that I run. Like right now, I'm working on one called Noise in the Workspace. And I literally started it out by taking dice, and I made a grid on a canvas, and I threw some dice, and that I had this. Each grid had a number, and then the dice would choose the number that I would put the mark on. I would put a mark in the grid and roll the dice and put a mark. And I did that, dozens of times until the grid on the painting had marks that randomly distributed. And then I took a ruler, and I made lines with markers between connecting the marks, so I made like a network, and it was like a network graph, but it was a random graph, basically a random network. And it's kind of pseudo-random because I had to choose where I was putting each mark within each grid, but the grids were chosen randomly. And that's true randomness, a dice. It's not like it was done pseudo-randomly with the computer. But anyway, so I play with randomness and pseudo-randomness in the workspace, and noise too. And now, more recently, I've been looking at randomized experimental parameters, where I include noise and randomness in the sort of organization of my workspace, and the tasks that I take on. I have maybe 100 tasks to do, and for 10 to 15 minutes I work on one, and then I move to the next, and move to the next, and move to the next, in a pseudo-random manner. Because it's pseudo-random because I'm still the art operator choosing which tasks, but I choose them based on their nearness, their ready to handness. How ready to hand is it? How near is it to me? How immediate or proximal approximate it is to me as the artist. Is it a surface within a 5 feet radius that I pick up? And they're all projects. The stacks are all, like I said, it's research for projects. So the topmost piece that I pop off the top of the stack is what I take, and I work on that, and I put it down, and I move the stacks around. I take pieces from beneath the stack, put them back on top of the stack. I'm always doing these algorithms with the stacks, and that's the Stacks project. That's how I came up with this idea for the Stacks project. And I came up with this many years ago, but it's only now that I'm writing the documentation on GitHub, so that the version control, distributed version control, so that people can see. First of all, they can cite the research and know that I was the originator, and also I can distribute the documentation so people can learn about my projects.